and welcome back to Unfuck Your Co-Parenting with me, Livy North. Have you ever walked away from a conversation thinking, how the hell did I just become the bad guy? You stayed calm, you tried to explain, you were trying to be reasonable, but eventually you just snapped. Maybe you raised your voice, maybe you sent an angry text, maybe you said something ugly that you regret. And suddenly, in that moment, the one where you reacted, that becomes the entire story. Not the weeks of baiting, not the constant accusations, not the way that this person kept pushing and pushing and pushing you. Just your reaction. And now everyone who saw it or heard about it thinks that you are the problem. It's not an accident. It's what we're talking about today on Unfuck Your Co-Parenting, where we like to unpack all of the crazy stuff that your ex does and how you can build boundaries to better protect yourself. We're going to dive into what reactive abuse is, what it looks like, how they get set up, and most importantly, the way out. How to actually recognize when they're trying to set you up and how to avoid the trap in the first place so you can start counteracting the narrative that you are the crazy one, because we all know it's not true. So let's just start by diving right in. What is reactive abuse? So reactive abuse is essentially when someone provokes you repeatedly until you react emotionally. And then they get to use your reaction as proof that you are the unstable one. They create the pressure. They highlight the explosion. And if you've ever thought, why does everyone think I'm the crazy one or I'm the unhinged? Why doesn't everyone see what they're doing? Why does my reaction matter more than the years of stuff that they've been doing? You're not imagining this. Reactive abuse is basically a psychological trap, and they push you until you break. And then they document the breaking point. And that's pretty much how the setup works. I'll give you an example from my own life. They know you, especially if we're talking about a co-parent or somebody who you're in a relationship with. They know what drives you nuts. So for me, I get overwhelmed with lots of things going on. I'm the kind of person who cannot read a book while a TV is on. I can focus on one thing at a time. So in a situation where the kids are in the backseat making lots of noise and crying and complaining, and I've got my ex talking in my ear, and we happen to have a friend in the backseat, and it's just quiet enough for the friend not to hear, you're doing this, you can't be doing this. I was like putting my hand back to try to soothe my daughter, and that's not safe. Put your hands back on the wheel. And I slammed on the brakes. I was like, what the fuck? And I swore in front of my kids, in front of our friend. And I was just like, what the fuck? I mean, it was not great for my kids, was not great for how my ex's friend viewed me. And in that moment, I was the problem. I did something I wasn't proud of, but the story wasn't this dude next to me trying to drive me insane. It was, this woman can't even handle her kids being crazy and she just slams on the brakes. And that is how the setup works. And reactive abuse usually follows a really predictive pattern. First, the provocation. And this is going to look like constant criticism, gaslighting, subtle digs, rewriting history. Again, whatever the person knows is really going to get to you. Maybe they question your memory, twist your words, accuse you of things that you didn't do. And each individual moment is small, but it's the death of 1,000 cuts. It never stops. Then the escalation. Maybe you set a boundary and it gets completely ignored. You try to disengage. They keep pushing in. They repeat the accusations. They demand explanations. They poke you with the exact emotional wound they know is going to get a reaction. And they do it in a way that other people don't notice. And when you try to explain it to your friends, you explain this one incident and then this other incident. And everything seems small. You should get over it. It's not that big a deal. Maybe he was having a bad day. But when you snap, you yell, you send a message you wish you could take back, you slam on the brakes, you throw a dish. Maybe you finally say exactly what you've been holding in for months. And that one moment becomes evidence. And suddenly there's screenshots, there's stories being told because now they can paint you as the unstable one. Because in their version of the story, your reaction is the beginning of the conflict, not the end of a long setup. And no one sees this. And that, I think, is one of the most frustrating parts for so many of my clients, as well as myself. One of the most painful parts of reactive abuse is the question, why am I the only one who sees it? And there's a few reasons, right? First, that final moment usually is the one that happens in public. They don't see the 47 messages that came before the one where you lost your patience. They don't hear the subtle digs that they're giving you behind closed doors or in the front seat of a car when they're screaming children in between you and the other person. They see the reaction. And reactions are really easy to judge. I mean, we've probably all been the one judging a reaction that someone else has had. Second reason is that narcissistic personalities are incredibly good at managing their public image. They're charming, they can appear calm, and they can tell a story in a way that looks incredibly reasonable. And because they were expecting the reaction, they often stayed perfectly composed when it happened. They looked calm because they already won. And third, again, most of this provocation actually happens in private, through text, behind closed doors, in subtle psychological ways that are hard to explain afterwards. And it's very difficult to summarize months of emotional manipulation in a way that sounds believable. And if you even if you have the screenshots and you're trying to explain to somebody who saw you blow up, and then all of a sudden you're sending them 700 different screenshots of all of these things and trying to put it in context, you still look like the crazy one because the visible evidence is your reaction. And finally, your reaction makes the story a lot simpler. Most people only want to understand a basic narrative. The person yelling is the problem. And what they don't understand is the slow psychological pressure that created that moment. And this is why you start doubting yourself. Because reactive abuse doesn't just damage your own reputation, it damages your sense of reality. Because after it happens, you often feel ashamed of your reaction, just like I did. You replay the moment over and over, and you start thinking, maybe I am the problem. Why did I overreact? Maybe I am the difficult one. And that self-doubt is part of the trap. It is part of the system. The goal isn't to make you just react. It is to make you question your own reality afterwards. And it works like a charm. Because once you start doubting yourself, you become easier to control. And this is something that I see happening all of the time in high conflict divorce and co-parenting. Because trust me, reactive abuse shows up a lot in marriages that are toxic. So this is truly just a continuation of a pattern, right? Because the legal system and social systems often are focused on the visible behavior, angry messages, raised voices in front of the kids, emotional reactions. Courts don't like to see you have an emotional reaction. Those things are easier to show. It is much harder to show months and months of slow provocation or trying to prove the intent of that provocation in court. So if someone understands how to provoke you strategically, they can systematically create a situation where you look like the unstable one while they appear calm and reasonable. And unfortunately, that dynamic shows up in courtrooms all of the time. All right, Liv, great. Thanks so much. You've done a great job of showing me why I'm still the fucking problem. That's not my intent here. I want to show you the way out. And this is how you can handle it. The most important thing to understand about reactive abuse is this. It only works if they can get a reaction. And once you see the pattern, the goal changes. You stop trying to prove that you're right. You stop trying to get them to understand. and you start understanding what it is that they're doing so you can focus on not participating in the setup. And this might mean reducing unnecessary communication. And if you listen to any of my social media shorts or a client of mine, you know my number one tip is reducing the amount of communication that happens. Moving from verbal communication to only written. Because in a verbal instance, when you are face to face with a person, it is much harder to take a breath, step back, and see what's happening. When something is written in front of you, you can see, you can take a moment, you can institute a rule where you make sure you don't respond at least for 15 minutes. I personally, if it's not an emergency, think 48 hours is perfectly acceptable. But that gives you time to look and to see and to identify what's happening and think about how you want to respond. Using parallel parenting instead of trying to cooperate with somebody who thrives on conflict is essentially what I'm saying here. And most importantly, you stop the habit of defending your character to someone who is committed to just misunderstanding you for their own benefit. Because reactive abuse isn't about resolving conflict. It's about creating evidence. And the moment you stop giving them that reaction that they're looking for, their entire strategy completely collapses. Reactive abuse works because people believe the explosion is the whole story. But once you understand the pattern, you stop asking, why does everyone think I'm the problem? And you start realizing that there's something much more important. The reaction was never the story. It was the evidence someone was trying to manufacture. And if you're dealing with high conflict ex or a narcissistic co-parent who constantly pushes you into reaction, subscribe, follow me. This channel is about understanding these patterns so you can stop playing the game that you were designed to lose. And make sure to tune in next week when we continue our series on trying to understand how these people work and give you the tools so you can better unfuck your co-parenting.